Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And here we are. This Parsha, called Acharei Mot, there it is, literally means after the death of Aaron's two sons. And it's interesting that there's this reference to Aaron's two sons as an introduction to a major section that talks about the right of the high priest on Yom Kippur. And the reason why it starts that way is because essentially Aaron is told that he cannot simply enter the Holy of Holies just in a casual kind of way. That it takes a lot of preparation that he has to do, which essentially takes place on Yom Kippur. And he has to dress differently, how he has to bring certain animals, etc., and go through a rite of purification he's going to be purifying the sanctuary on this one day on Yom Kippur. And because Aaron's two sons went into the holy place without all the necessary preparations and listening to all the mitzvot, etc., and they died. Likewise, there is this possibility that if the high priest does not properly prepare himself or is not sufficiently worthy, he will not be able to attain this particular level of sanctity. And we, of course, started this last year. We did get through some point. The priest has to take some animals on his own behalf, and he also and his fellow priests and Levites. And then he also takes a couple of animals on behalf of the Israelites as well. So we're in the midst of these particular moments here on verse 24. And here we are talking about his having to immerse himself. And in fact, the high priest goes through several immersions in this particular day. There's some interesting things to think about regarding what we're reading about here. And that is that holiness one has to be worthy of holiness. You can't just go through, I think there's a underlining here, that going through what you might call, religious things isn't just an external thing. For example, I have my talit and tefillin on, but it isn't just a matter of putting on my talit and tefillin, even though it is supposed to be in itself an act of devotion. But if I don't really try my best to reflect the beauty and the holiness that is involved in these particular ritual objects, if anything, it is even worse. It is very similar to what happens when we understand that somebody deeply religious, or who, so to speak, carries a religious badge, does something that's heinous. It's worse than if just a regular person who makes no pretense at being religious acts in that way. Both are obnoxious, but one is considered a chilul Hashem. Excuse me, one moment. One is considered a desecration of God's name, because when you are religious, or when you try to act in a religious way, in an open kind of way, people associate that with God, worship of God, if that's the nature of your religion. And so when you behave that way, it is even worse. And in some ways, that's what the message is here. And I love a line that I heard that used to be said in an African-American church, where at the end, if you've ever been to a service there, very often their services are very, very emotional and really rock very much. And the minister used to end his services by saying, the worship is ending, and the service is beginning. And he'd say that at the end of services. And I think he captured exactly what it's about. So trying to do that isn't easy, but of course, the higher up on the ladder you are, the longer it can, or rather, the further you have to fall down. So going into the Holy of Holies was an amazing thing. Rav Kook used to he was the chief rabbi of Israel in the early days prior to statehood, and they would talk about the early pioneers who weren't particularly religious, but they were pioneers and they lived a pioneer life, and it was a very, very tough thing. And sometimes they'd be criticized for not being religious. And Rav Kook, who obviously was very deeply religious and a great mystic, used to say, well, he said, they're building up the land. They're trying to rebuild the land of Israel for the Jewish people. And if you look at when they built the temple, the builders who used to construct the temple would go into the Holy of Holies every single day. They'd go in every single day to build the Holy of Holies. And the high priest could only go in once a year with all that preparation. It was interesting observation he had. So, continuing the actual text here, v'rachatz et besaro v'mayim, he shall bathe his flesh in water. Essentially, that means he should immerse himself in a mikveh. That's how we understand this, right? B'makom kadosh, in a holy place. V'lavash et begadav, and he should don his garments, v'yatsa, and go out, v'asa et olato, and perform his olah offering, v'et olat ha'am, and the olah offering of the people, v'chiper ba'ado, and he should make atonement for himself, uva'ad ha'am, and on behalf of the people. So we're catching this in the midst of things. The garments that we're talking about are the garments that he normally would wear as in his office as high priest. When he went into the holy place, he had to wear nothing but linen garments. But we had the Parsha where we discussed the garments of the high priest, and part of his service on Yom Kippur was to go out to the altar that was in the courtyard to make these offerings that we just read about. And in that case, he had to put on different garments, his regular garments of office, in order to perform that. Let's take a look at the Rashi here, right? V'rachatz et besaro, he should wash his flesh, he should wash himself. And this is from a tractate, Yoma, which means the day. And it's a tractate in the Mishnah and in the Gemara, in the Talmud, that is devoted to Yom Kippur and what the high priest did. And in this tractate, we can actually read about all the details, right, and the circumstances that would surround the actual practice of this mitzvah. So page 32. Lamala lamadnu, above, in other words, earlier on in the passages that we were reading here in Acharei, we learned from the verse v'rachatz et besaro. So we had an earlier verse that said v'rachatz et besaro, he should bathe his flesh, uleveisham, and he should wear them. Shekeshahu mishane mibigdei zahav, that when he changes from his gold garments, because the regular garments, his regular uniform included gold, you may remember, okay? Livdigdei lavan, to white garments. These are the linen garments that he'd wear when he entered into the holy area. Ta'un tefillah, it requires tefillah, it requires immersion. Shebe'ota tefillah, because in that particular immersion, pashat b'gdei zahav, he would take off his gold garments, she'avad bahem, in which he served avodat tamid. He did the tamid offering. So just to refresh our memories, the very first offering that was brought in the temple on a daily basis was a lamb in the morning, and then At the end of the day's offerings, there was a lamb brought as an offering at the end of the day. And this was brought in, day out, Shabbos, Yom Tov, New Moon. They always had these two lambs that were, in a sense, like bookends to whatever the day's offerings required. So the first thing that the high priest would do on Yom Kippur would be to offer up the Tamid offering, Tamid Shel Shachar, the Tamid offering of the morning. Velavash bigdei lavan, and then he would put on his linen, those white garments, la'avodat hayom, for the service of the day, that is to say, the Yom Kippur, specific Yom Kippur offerings. V'kan lamadu, and here we learn, shekeshehu mishaneh bigdei lavan levigdei zahav, that when he changes from his white garments to gold garments, ta'un tefillah, once again, he requires immersion. B'makom kadosh, it says a holy place. Well, what exactly do we mean by a holy place? There's a lot of holy places around the temple area. So again, this is the Sifra, Torat Kohanim, and Yoma, and the tractate Yoma, again, on this page, on page 32. Ha-mekudash b'kedushat azara. In other words, it is sanctified with the level of holiness of the courtyard, of the temple courtyard. Vehi haita begag Beit HaParva, and this was on the roof. This location where he immersed himself was on the roof of the Beit HaParva. It's known as the Beit HaParva, and I'm going to show you. I was fortunate to find a diagram of the temple giving a listing of all the various rooms, etc., and I will show it to you in a moment. Let me get to the end of this particular Rashi. V'chein arba tefilot habaot, and likewise the four immersions which were coming up, chova layom, required for the day, aval harishona hayta bechel. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But the very first immersion that he performed before these particular immersions, right? So it looks like there were 6 altogether, at least. So there's this one that we're talking about and another 4 coming up. So that makes 5. And then, of course, the very first immersion, he says that was in the Chel. And I looked it up, of course, and it says a place in the fortification of the temple. So we're looking at a place in the walls of the temple. I want to finish the Rashi, and then I'll switch over to the other diagram. Velavash it begadav, he shall don his garments. Shmona begadim, these are the 8 garments. Shehu uved bahem kol yemot hashana, in which he performs his service throughout the year, all the days of the year. So only on Yom Kippur that he'd put on these particular linen garments. And of course, white symbolizes purity, right? V'yatsa, he shall go out. Min ha-heichal, from the heichal. Again, the heichal was this antechamber that was there in the temple. El hachatzer, into the courtyard. Shemizbech ha'olah sham, because the altar for making the sacrifices, here it's simply called the olah altar, was there in the courtyard. Va'asa et olato, and he should perform his olah, his sacrifice, his olah sacrifice. And what was that? Ayil la'olah. We're referring here to the ram that was dedicated as an olah offering. Amur lamala, which was said above, bezot yavo Aharon. Earlier on in our Parsha, it says, Aaron shall present himself with this, and it refers, one of the animals is the ram. Ve'et olat ha'am, and likewise the olah offering of the people. And here, this is the reference in Yoma 73. Va'ayil le'olah, and again, an ayil would be a ram as an olah. Make sure I got Amur Lamala, and likewise it's also stated above, and it says Me'et Adat Bnei Yisrael, and it says, and then from the congregation of the children of Israel, etc. So let me now go to a new share and see if I can find this diagram for you. And here it is. This, in a sense, is a bird's eye view of the temple. And the Beit HaParva, let me see if I can find it. I believe I did. And if I'm not mistaken, let me see if I can find it. Okay, I did before. Now I'm looking, and I wasn't able to circle this. Let me see. Maybe it's called Lishkat HaParva. My recollection is that it's like this place. I thought it was number 50. That's Parhedrin, but it does say, oh, here it is. There it is, Lishkat HaParva. So it's number 18. Let's see where 18, oh, it's right over here. So it was this area over here, right? We're looking down at the temple, right? This is the women's court here. Here, by the way, we had talked about the Nicanor gate. This is the Nicanor gate here. Here is the altar, right? In the courtyard of the temple. I think this would be considered the fortifications of the temple, this area here. Let's see, what else? Was there another place mentioned? Let me look at something. Yes, this little area here was a little house where they had a fire burning, where the priest would go to warm themselves up because they had to do their service this was a marble floor here, and they had to do their service barefoot. Oh, there was another thing, and that is the Heichal. So let me check. Right, here it says Heichal, number 35. So this is the Heichal, right in there. So this is the Holy of Holies, right, with the ark. This is the holy precinct here that we had read about, right? This is corresponding to these areas in the tabernacle. Now, this room here was something that was added later. This was this antechamber that was there. But it's saying that the high priest was here in the Heichal, and then when he went out, he had to go down and then offer up his sacrifices up here, okay, on this altar. So this gives you the excuse me, the directions. This is Ma'arav, this is west, this is north, and east and south. So the western wall is right over here, is in this location right over here. This is the western wall. And they say the reason, one explanation of the fact that the western wall survived of everything else, the temple was destroyed entirely, except for the western wall, which survived. And they say that the significance, of course, is that the western wall was closest to the Holy of Holies. So I'm sorry this isn't in English, but I'm very grateful to have found it and to find such a lovely detailed listing of the various areas of the temple. And we may, of course, go back to it again. So we'll go back to that. Let me see if I have any. Oh, I have this just to show you. This is where, I looked it up obviously on Google. And this is another share just of what the temple looked like, a little bit different here. This is in English, but it's not nearly in the detail of this particular illustration here. It talks about some chambers. There's some nice areas here. Okay, let's see. I can do this. Oops, let's see if I can. There we go. Here we go. So you can see this far less detail here. but something about how it looked. I'm trying to look and see. There were some other pictures that were nice here. This is nice, right? Nice illustration of it.
What's that?
Here it tells you a little bit. So this was an area, a chamber where they had the wood that they kept it. This is this place. This is Beit HaMokad. This is this area where they had that fire going to keep the priests warm, etc. It's nice. Some nice pictures here. And this is the tunnel. You can actually go there, right? You can visit this. Actually was in there, and you can get very close to the actual Holy of Holies, etc., etc., etc. Okay, there's some other pictures. All right, we'll go back to make sure I can find what I'm looking at here. And here we are. So this may be a good place to stop. I'll tell you what, I will take a little bit more. The eight chelev hachatat, and the fat of the sin offering, yaktir hamizbecha, he should cause to smoke on the altar. Take a look at the Rashi. Ve'et chelev hachatat, and the fat part of the sin offering. And he says, imurei par v'sa'ir. He says these are the imurim. Remember, we talked about that. Those were the parts of the sacrifice that would be placed on the altar. And this was of the bull. Aaron had to bring a bull as well as a ram. And the sa'ir, and this sa'ir would be a goat. Okay, that this was, I believe, the offering on behalf of the people. Yaktir hamizbecha, he should cause to smoke on the altar. And he makes a point that this is al mizbech hachitzon. This is, there were two altars, right? There was the gold altar inside where they offered up incense, and there was the bronze altar on the outside where they offered the sacrifice. And Rashi says, to be clear, we're talking about the exterior altar. De elu bipnimi kativ, because the inner altar, the one on the inside, kativ, it's stated in scripture, lo ta'alu alav katoret zara, okay? You shall not place upon it any strange, literally it means strange incense, but it means any incense or foreign incense that was not specifically commanded. And the recipe of this incense is given, but it's not in Exodus when we talked about the Mishkan. It cannot be anything else. The olah, and you can't put on it an olah, umincha, or meal offerings. And this is from Exodus chapter 30. And I believe that is it. Yeah, that is it for the Rashi on that verse. So we'll continue. I'll take this and move this over here. And with God's help, we will do this tomorrow. So I'm going to stop the share. Are there any questions or any comments that you'd like to make before I stop the recording?
Does he make amends for the people and himself and his family?
Indeed, he does. He does it on his own behalf and his fellow priests' behalf, and then on behalf of the Israelites too. Yes.
Well, why do they burn the incense? I don't understand that.
We want to involve all the senses, and we know that when it comes to the olfactory organs in the brain, they go deep into the brain, and so they have a profound emotional effect on people. That's one of the reasons why they have things such as perfume, because we react emotionally to smells, and they wanted the worship to be something that was completely involved, that you were completely involved in. So
where did you get the ram and the bull? From the people, or he has his own ram and bull?
The bull would have to come from his own personal collection. But on the other hand, the one that represented the people, remember, they took the half shkalim and they put that into the temple treasury, and they used that money to purchase sacrifices that were public offerings.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop the recording here. Thank you.